They landed at dawn. The dropship touched down on a flat ridge half a kilometer north of the river. The jungle spread out below them like a green ocean, endless and thick, steaming under the light of the twin moons that had not yet set. The air hit Yuna's face the moment the hatch opened. Hot, wet, heavy with the smell of rotting leaves and living things. She stepped out first. Behind her came Minho, already grinning, his long hunting blade strapped across his back. And behind him came Jisoo, the quietest of the three. Jisoo was a tracker. She did not talk much, but she could follow a trail through stone if she had to. Her golden eyes moved constantly, reading the ground, the trees, the direction of the wind. His signal was near the river last night, Yuna said, pulling up the holographic map on her wrist device. The red dot had not moved for several hours. He may still be there. Sleeping, Minho said, checking his blade. Humans sleep a third of their lives. Weak creatures. All creatures sleep, Jisoo said quietly, already kneeling to study the ground. Minho shrugged. Not as much as humans. Yuna ignored them both and looked south. The canopy was so thick she could not see the river from here, but she could hear it, a faint rushing sound buried under the noise of the jungle. Birds called out from the treetops. Something heavy moved through the branches far away. We move slow, Yuna said. Stay together. Watch the ground. For what? Minho asked. He is one human with no weapons. He has a knife, Yuna said. Minho laughed. A knife? I have killed sand dragons, Yuna. A knife does not worry me. Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Move slow, she repeated. Stay together. They entered the jungle. The first day told Yuna more than she expected. Boot prints in the soft mud near the ridge, heading south in a straight line toward the river. The steps were even and steady. No sign of limping, no sign of hurry. He had walked calmly through the jungle in the dark, alone, on a world he had never seen before. He is not afraid, Jisoo said, crouching beside a footprint. He does not know we are coming, Minho said. He knows, Jisoo replied. She pointed to a mark on a nearby tree, a thin scratch at eye level, made with a blade. He is marking his path. He is not lost. He is mapping. They followed the trail south. The jungle grew thicker as they moved downhill. Vines hung across the path like curtains. The ground became softer, wetter. Twice they had to cross small streams that cut through the mud. Minho cursed each time his boots sank in. By midday they reached the river. What they found there made Yuna stop. He had built a camp. Not a hiding spot. Not a hole in the ground. Not a pile of leaves thrown together in panic. A camp. A real one. He had cut branches and woven them into a low shelter near the water's edge. He had stacked flat stones into a small fire pit, though there was no fire now. He had dug a shallow trench around the shelter to keep water from running in if it rained. He had even made a simple filter out of sand and cloth to clean the river water. All of this in one night. Minho stood at the edge of the camp and said nothing for the first time since they had landed. Jisoo knelt and touched the ground inside the shelter. He slept here. The ground is pressed flat, but he left before sunrise. Where did he go? Yuna asked. Jisoo moved along the riverbank, her eyes scanning the mud. She stopped, tilted her head, and pointed southeast. That way, along the river, still not running. She looked at the fire pit, the shelter, the water filter. Something cold settled in her chest. Not fear, not exactly. More like the feeling of stepping into deep water and realizing she could not see the bottom. This human was not behaving like prey. Prey ran. Prey hid. Prey made mistakes because fear controlled their bodies and clouded their thinking. Every species they had ever hunted followed the same pattern. The Valkyrie had studied it for thousands of years. Fear was the great equalizer. It did not matter how fast or strong a creature was. Fear made them stupid. Fear made them predictable. Fear made them easy. But this human was not afraid. He was building. He was planning. He was moving with purpose. "We follow," Yuna said. "Faster now." They tracked him along the river for the rest of the day. His trail was easy to follow. He was not trying to hide his path. He walked in the open, along the riverbank, stopping every so often to do something Jisoo could not fully explain. "He is studying the plants," she said at one point, kneeling beside a bush that had been carefully pulled apart. Leaves were missing, and several roots had been dug up. "For food?" Minho asked. "Maybe. Or medicine, or something else." Later, they found another marking on a tree. This one was different. Not just a scratch, but a small pattern. 3 lines crossing each other in a triangle. "What does that mean?" Yuna asked. Jisoo stared at it. "I do not know. But he is leaving them every 100 steps or so, like a language." Minho frowned. "A language for who? There is no one else here." "For himself," Jisoo said. "He is building a system." Night came fast on the jungle moon. The twin moons rose again, casting blue and red shadows through the canopy. The jungle came alive with sound. Creatures howled and clicked and screamed from every direction. The air cooled slightly but stayed heavy and wet. Yuna made them stop and set up a watch. No fire, no noise. They sat in the dark and listened to the jungle breathe around them. "He is close," Jisoo whispered. "Maybe a kilometer ahead." He stopped again, probably building another camp. "Good," Minho said. "We move in before dawn and finish this." "No," Yuna said. Minho looked at her. "No? We watch him first. I want to understand what he is doing." "What he is doing is surviving," Minho said. "Badly. He has a knife and some river water. He is no threat. We are wasting time." "Then one more day will not matter," Yuna said. Her voice was calm, but it had an edge that Minho knew not to push against. He leaned back against a tree and closed his eyes. Jisoo moved closer to Yuna. "You feel it too," she said quietly. "Feel what?" He should not be this calm. Yuna did not answer right away. She looked up through the canopy at the 2 moons hanging in the dark sky. She thought about the old scouting files she had read, the warning buried in the data. Do not engage human ground forces in extended conflict. They adapt. "Tomorrow we get closer," Yuna said. "But we do not attack. Not yet." "Why?" Jisoo asked. "Because I want to see what he builds next." The second day was worse. They found his new camp at first light. It was better than the first one. The shelter was stronger, the trench deeper, the fire pit lined with clay from the riverbank. But that was not what made Yuna's skin tighten. He had set traps. Small ones, subtle ones. Jisoo almost walked into the first one. A vine stretched tight across the path at knee height, tied to a bent branch loaded with a heavy stone. If she had tripped it, the stone would have swung into her legs hard enough to break bone. "He made this last night," Jisoo said, carefully stepping around it. Her voice was different now, quieter, more careful. They found 2 more traps before noon. One was a pit covered with leaves, shallow but lined with sharpened sticks at the bottom. The other was a net made from woven vines, hung from a high branch and designed to drop on anything that walked beneath it. None of the traps were deadly. That was the part that unsettled Yuna most. They were designed to slow, to injure, to delay. He was not trying to kill them. He was trying to control the ground. Minho pulled a sharpened stick from the pit trap and turned it over in his hands. His grin was gone. He looked at the stick, looked at the jungle around him, and said nothing. "He knows we are here," Jisoo said. "He has known since we landed." "How?" Minho asked. "Because we are loud," Jisoo said, "and he is listening." Yuna stood at the edge of the second camp and felt the cold in her chest spread deeper. She had hunted many creatures across many worlds. She had never felt this before. Not fear, Something worse. Doubt. She looked southeast, where his trail continued along the river. Somewhere ahead, the human named Tejo was walking calmly through the jungle, building camps, setting traps, marking trees, studying plants, filtering water, and sleeping in the open like he owned this moon. He was not running. He was not hiding. He was preparing. And for the first time in her life, Yuna was not sure what she was hunting. Minho vanished on the third night. They had made camp near a bend in the river where the water slowed and pooled between flat rocks. Yuna had taken first watch, sitting with her back against a tree and her blade across her knees. Jisoo slept curled on her side near the base of another tree. Minho had leaned against a fallen log a few meters away and closed his eyes, one hand resting on the handle of his hunting blade, even in sleep. The jungle was loud that night. The twin moons were both high, casting strange double shadows through the canopy. Creatures moved in the dark. Something large splashed in the river upstream. The usual sounds, the clicking, the howling, the rustle of leaves, filled the air like a song that never stopped. Yuna watched and listened. She watched the trees. She watched the spaces between the trees. She watched the shadows, where the moonlight could not reach. She did not know what she was looking for, but she watched anyway. Her shift ended, and she woke Jisoo. She told her to stay alert. Jisoo nodded without a word, and took her place against the tree. Yuna lay down, and closed her eyes. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it was thin and restless. She woke before dawn. The sky was still dark. The moons had moved to the west. The jungle was quieter now, the way it always got in the hour before sunrise, as if the whole world was holding its breath. She sat up and looked around. Jisoo was sitting where Yuna had left her, awake and still, her golden eyes wide. The log where Minho had been sleeping was empty. Yuna stood fast. Where is he? Jisoo did not move. She stared at the empty log, as if she could not believe what she was seeing. I do not know, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He was there. I watched him. I looked away for a moment, just a moment, to check the river. When I looked back, he was gone. Gone where? I do not know. Yuna moved to the log. Minho's blade was still there, lying on the ground where his hand had rested. That stopped her cold. Minho never left his blade. He had carried that weapon since his first hunt. He slept with it. He cleaned it every night. He would not have left it behind willingly. She knelt and studied the ground. The soil was soft from recent rain. She could see Minho's boot prints near the log, deep and clear. And then she saw something else. A second set of prints, lighter, softer, with a different pattern. Human boots. He had walked into their camp, while they slept, while Jisoo watched. He had come close enough to touch Minho, close enough to take him, and Jisoo had not seen a thing. Yuna felt something she had never felt before on a hunt. Her hands were steady, her breathing was even, but somewhere deep inside her chest, something was shaking. She looked at Jisoo and saw the same thing in her eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the beginning of it. The first crack in the wall. We track him, Yuna said, now. They followed the trail. It was not hard. Minho was large and heavy, and wherever he had been taken, his boots had dragged through the mud. The trail led southeast again, along the river, deeper into the jungle. Tejo's lighter footprints walked beside the drag marks, steady and even as always. He had carried Minho, or dragged him. Either way, he had moved a Valkyrie warrior twice his size through the jungle in the dark, without making enough noise to alert them. Jisoo tracked in silence. Her face was tight. She moved faster than before, almost reckless, and Yuna had to grab her arm twice to slow her down. Careful, Yuna said. He has traps. I know, Jisoo said, but her eyes were not watching the ground. They were watching the trees. She was afraid now. Yuna could see it. And that made everything worse. because Jisoo was the calmest hunter Yuna had ever known. They found Minho an hour after sunrise. He was lying at the bottom of a pit. It was deeper than the first one they had found, almost 2 meters deep, with smooth walls carved out of the clay-heavy soil. Sharpened sticks lined the bottom, angled outward like teeth. Minho had fallen onto them. 3 sticks had gone through his right leg. 1 had pierced his side just below the ribs. He was alive, but he was not moving much. His golden eyes were open, staring up at the circle of sky above the pit. Yuna looked down at him and felt the cold in her chest become ice. But what she saw next was the thing that changed everything. Beside Minho, placed carefully on the ground where he could reach it, was a water packet, one of the small emergency packets from a human survival kit. It was open, and some of the water was gone. Minho had drunk from it. The human had stabbed him with sharpened sticks, and then left him water. Yuna stared at that water packet for a long time. She tried to understand it. In every hunt she had ever been part of, prey either fought or ran. They killed or they died. There was no middle ground. There was no mercy. The jungle did not allow it. But this human had hurt Minho just enough to take him out of the fight, and then made sure he would not die of thirst while he waited to be found. That was not the behavior of prey. That was not even the behavior of a predator. That was strategy. They pulled Minho out of the pit using vines. He groaned when they moved him, but did not scream. The wounds in his leg were deep but clean. The one in his side had missed anything vital. Jisoo used the medical kit to stop the bleeding and wrap the injuries. Minho lay on the ground beside the pit and breathed through his teeth. "He came into the camp," Minho said. His voice was rough and dry. I felt a hand on my neck. Something pressed against the side of my throat. I could not move, could not speak. He picked me up like I weighed nothing. "Humans are not that strong," Jisoo said. "This one is," Minho replied. He looked at Yuna. There was something new in his eyes, something she had never seen in him before. He whispered something to me, in his language. I did not understand the words, but I understood the meaning. "What meaning?" Yuna asked. He was telling me to be quiet. Silence filled the space between them. The jungle hummed and buzzed and clicked all around, but the 3 of them sat in a silence that was heavier than sound. Yuna looked at the pit. She looked at the sharpened sticks. She looked at the water packet. She looked at Minho's wrapped wounds. He had taken their strongest warrior out of the fight without killing him. He had done it silently, in the dark, inside their own camp, while they were on watch. And then he had left water so Minho would survive. He was not trying to kill them. He was sending a message. "Can you walk?" Yuna asked Minho. "No," he admitted. He tried to sit up, and his face twisted with pain. "Not fast. Not far." Yuna looked at Jisoo. "Stay with him. Use the emergency beacon. Call the ship for extraction." "And you?" Jisoo asked. "I am going after him," Yuna replied. "Alone?" "Yes." Jisoo stood up fast. "That is foolish. He took Minho from under my watch. He built traps we almost did not see. He has been 3 steps ahead of us since we landed. Going alone is how you end up in a pit. Or it is how I end up face to face with him," Yuna said. "That is what I am afraid of." Yuna looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked down at Minho, who was staring at the sky with a look she did not recognize. It was not anger. It was not shame. It was something quieter. Something that might have been respect. "He could have killed me," Minho said softly. "The sticks in the pit. He could have placed them at the center. He could have aimed them at my chest, at my throat. He chose my leg. He chose my side. He chose the places that would hurt, but not kill. What kind of creature does that?" Minho looked at Yuna. Yuna did not answer. She checked her blade, tightened her boots, and looked southeast along the river. Somewhere ahead, through the thick green wall of the jungle, the human was walking. Calm, steady, unhurried. He had taken one of them without a sound. He had set traps that could break bones. He had walked through their camp like a ghost. And he had left water for the one he hurt. Yuna started walking. Behind her, Jisoo activated the emergency beacon. Its light blinked red against the pale morning sky. Minho lay on the ground and stared up at the trees. Somewhere in the canopy, a bird screamed. The jungle swallowed Yuna whole. She walked faster now. She did not try to be quiet. There was no point. He already knew she was coming. He had known everything from the beginning. Where they landed, how many they were, how they moved, when they slept. He had read them the way Jisoo read trails, easily and completely. She followed his tracks along the river for another kilometer. The marks on the trees continued. The triangle pattern appeared every 100 steps, just as before. But now she noticed something new. Small notches cut into the bark below the triangles. 1 notch, 2 notches, 3. He was counting something. She did not know what. The trail left the river and turned east into the deepest part of the jungle. The canopy closed overhead until almost no light came through. The air was thick and hot and still. Sounds echoed strangely here. A branch breaking sounded like it came from everywhere at once. Yuna walked into the dark, and somewhere ahead, patient and waiting, Taeho stopped walking for the first time in 3 days. He sat down on a fallen tree, placed his knife across his knees, and watched the jungle behind him. He had heard her coming a long time ago. Yuna saw him before he spoke. He was sitting on a fallen tree in a small clearing where the canopy had broken open and pale blue light poured down through the gap. His back was straight. His hands rested on his knees, the small knife lying flat across them like an offering. He was not hiding. He was not running. He was sitting in the open, in the light, and he was watching the jungle behind him with dark, steady eyes. He was smaller than she expected. The reports said humans were short by galactic standards, and it was true. He was a full head shorter than her, with a lean body, brown skin darkened by 3 days of sun and mud, and black hair that stuck to his forehead with sweat. His clothes were torn and dirty. His boots were cracked. His left arm had a deep bruise running from the elbow to the wrist. He looked like nothing, like no threat at all. And yet Minho, who had killed a sand dragon with his bare hands, was lying beside a pit with holes in his body because of this man. Yuna stepped into the clearing slowly. She held her blade low at her side, not raised, not threatening, but ready. Her golden eyes locked on his dark ones and did not look away. Taeho watched her come. He did not stand. He did not reach for his knife. He sat on the fallen tree and watched her the way someone watches rain move across a field, calmly and with patience. They looked at each other across 10 meters of open ground, and the jungle went quiet around them. Even the birds stopped calling. Even the insects stopped buzzing. The world held its breath. "You are the leader," Taeho said. His voice surprised her. It was quiet and even, with no shaking, no tension, no anger. He spoke in basic galactic common, the trade language that most species used in the border regions. His accent was rough, but clear enough to understand. "Yes," Yuna said. "The big one is alive," Taeho said. It was not a question. "Yes, you made sure of that." "I did." "Why?" Taeho looked at her for a long moment. The blue light from the gap in the canopy fell across half his face. The other half was in shadow. His eyes were so dark they looked black, and they held a weight that Yuna had not expected. Not anger, not fear. Something older. Something deeper. "Because killing him was not the point," Taeho said. Yuna tightened her grip on her blade. "Then what was the point?" "To show you that I could." The words hung in the warm air between them. Yuna felt them settle against her skin like heat. She understood what he was saying. He had taken Minho not to remove a threat, but to deliver a message. He could have killed Minho in his sleep. He could have cut his throat with that little knife. He could have placed the sharpened sticks in the center of the pit instead of the edges. He had chosen not to. He was telling her what he was capable of, and he was telling her that he had chosen mercy instead. That was more frightening than any act of violence she had ever seen. "You hunt," Tejo said. He tilted his head slightly. "That is what this is, a hunt. I am the prey." "You were supposed to be," Yuna said. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face, quick and gone. "I know. I understood when I woke up on this moon. The crash was not an accident. You brought me here on purpose, put me in the jungle, let me run so you could chase me." "You did not run," Yuna said. "No," Tejo said. "Why?" Tejo looked down at the knife on his knees. He turned it over slowly in his hands. It was a small thing, barely longer than his palm, with a dull edge and a cracked handle. A tool for cutting rope, not a weapon. And yet, he held it like it was enough. "On my world," he said, "there is a very old saying. I do not know how to translate it perfectly, but it means something like this." He looked up at her. "If you run from a thing that wants to eat you, you die tired." Yuna stared at him. "Humans learned a long time ago that running does not save you," Tejo continued. His voice was still calm, still quiet, like he was telling a story to a child. "We are not fast, we are not strong, we do not have claws, or thick skin, or sharp teeth. Every other creature on our world was better than us at something. Faster, bigger, deadlier." He paused. "But we are still here, and most of them are not." "How?" Yuna asked. She did not mean to ask it. The word came out on its own, pulled from somewhere deeper than her training. Tejo looked at her with those dark, heavy eyes. "Because we do not run. We watch, we learn, we adapt. And when we are ready, we do not flee from the thing that hunts us." He set the knife down on the log beside him. "We hunted back." The clearing was perfectly still. No wind, no sound. The blue light from above did not move. Yuna realized that her heart was beating faster than it should. She was a Valkyrie. She had killed creatures 10 times her size. She had walked through fire and ice and acid storms. She was not supposed to feel this, but she felt it anyway. Not fear, not exactly. It was closer to what a person feels when they stand at the edge of a very high cliff and look down. The ground is far away, the wind is strong, and they realize, suddenly and completely, that they have made a terrible mistake. "You set this up," Yuna said slowly. "All of it. The camp by the river, the traps, the marks on the trees. You wanted us to follow you. You wanted us to find those things." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted you to understand before we met face to face." Tejo stood up from the log. He did not pick up his knife. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked at her. "I wanted you to see what one human can do in 3 days with a knife and some river mud. I wanted you to feel what it is like to track something that is not afraid of you." He took a step toward her. "Just one. Now imagine what happens when there are more of us, when we have time, when we have tools, when we have each other." Yuna did not step back, but she wanted to. Her body screamed at her to step back, to raise her blade, to put distance between herself and this small, soft, clawless creature that had taken apart her hunting party without a weapon. "The marks on the trees," she said. "The triangles, the notches, what were they?" "The notches count the days." "Count the days until what?" "Until I was ready." "Ready for what?" Tejo looked at her. "For this, for you. Standing here, alone, without your team, asking me questions instead of attacking." Yuna's breath caught. She understood. He had planned this moment. Every trap, every camp, every mark on every tree had been designed to lead to this exact place, this exact clearing, this exact conversation. He had separated her from her team. He had wounded Minho to slow them down. He had left a trail easy enough to follow, so she would come after him alone. He had herded her like prey. "I am offering you a choice," Tejo said. "The same choice I gave the big one when I carried him through the jungle. I could have killed him. I did not. I can make this jungle very difficult for anyone who stays in it. But I do not want to." "What do you want?" Yuna asked. "To leave. I want to leave this moon and go home. I am a cargo pilot. I am not a soldier. I do not want to fight you. I do not want to kill anyone. But I will if you make me." He said it simply, without boasting, without threat. He said it the way someone says the sky is blue or the river runs downhill. A plain fact, an obvious truth. Yuna looked at him for a long time. She looked at his bruised arm, his torn clothes, his cracked boots. She looked at the small knife lying on the log behind him. She looked at the clearing, at the gap in the canopy, at the blue light that fell around them like water. She thought about the reports she had read. Soft creatures, no claws, no armor. Barely worth noticing. She thought about Minho lying in a pit, alive because this man had decided he should be alive. She thought about Jisoo, the best tracker she had ever known, who had not heard or seen a thing when this man walked through their camp at night. She thought about the old warning in the scouting file. Do not engage human ground forces in extended conflict. They adapt. 3 days. He had been on this moon for 3 days. In that time, he had built shelter, found water, set traps, mapped the terrain, studied the local plants, developed a marking system, neutralized the strongest member of her team, and led her alone into a clearing of his choosing. In 3 days, with a knife. "If I choose to fight," Yuna said slowly, "what happens?" Tejo looked at her. Something sad passed through his eyes, quick and deep, like a fish turning in dark water. "Then only one of us walks out of this jungle, and I have been getting ready for 3 days. Yuna stood in the clearing and felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. 3,000 years of Valkyrie hunting tradition, the honor of her house, the pride of her people. All of it demanded that she raise her blade and finish the hunt. But she was smart. Smarter than pride, smarter than tradition. She looked at the humans standing before her, small and battered and calm, and she made her choice. She lowered her blade. "I will take you off this moon," she said. Tejo nodded once. He reached back and picked up his knife, folding it closed and slipping it into his belt. Then he looked at her one more time. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me," Yuna replied. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing this because I finally understand what you are." "And what am I?" Yuna turned and began walking north, back through the jungle, back toward the river, back toward the ship that would take them both away from this moon. "Something we should never have hunted," she said, without looking back. Tejo followed her into the trees. The jungle closed around them, green and alive and breathing, and the twin moons began their slow fall toward the horizon. The pale flame left orbit above the jungle moon 2 hours after Yuna and Tejo walked out of the trees. Nobody spoke when they came aboard. The crew of the warship, all proud Valkyrie soldiers, all raised on stories of the great hunts, stood in silence as their commander walked through the loading bay with a human at her side. He was shorter than all of them. He was covered in mud and bruises. He carried nothing but a small folding knife tucked into his belt, and every single one of them stepped out of his way. They had watched the feeds from the jungle moon. They had seen the camps Tejo built. They had watched the tracker replay of Minho being taken from under Jisoo's watch without a sound. They had zoomed in on the sharpened sticks and the water packet. They had watched their commander, the killer of sand dragons, walk into a clearing and lower her blade to a creature that weighed half what she did and had no weapon worth naming. None of them spoke. None of them needed to. Minho was already in the medical bay when they arrived. His wounds had been cleaned and sealed. The Valkyrie healed fast, faster than most species, and the doctor said he would walk again within a few days. But when Yuna came to see him, she found him sitting upright on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall. "It is over," she told him. "I know," he said. He did not look at her. "This human, is he aboard?" "Yes, we are taking him to the border. He will be released into human space." Minho nodded slowly. His big hands rested on his knees, the same hands that had snapped the neck of a sand dragon. They looked smaller now somehow. "I have been thinking," Minho said, "about the pit." Yuna waited. "He carried me through the jungle, in the dark, over rough ground. I am twice his weight. He did not stumble. He did not slow down." Minho turned and looked at her. "The reports say they are weak." "The reports were wrong," Yuna said. "Not just wrong, dangerous." Minho looked back at the wall. "If we had sent a real hunting party, 20 warriors, 50, it would not have mattered. He would have adapted. He would have changed his strategy, built different traps, used different ground, found different ways to turn our strength against us. You do not know that." "I do," Minho said quietly, "because he told me." "When?" "In the jungle, when he carried me. He whispered to me. I said before that I did not understand the words. That was not true. I understood some of them. He spoke in common. He said, 'The more you send, the harder it gets, for you.'" The ship hummed around them, metal and light, and the distant sound of engines pushing them through the dark between stars. Yuna stood beside Minho's bed and felt the weight of those words sink into her like stones into water. She left the medical bay and went to find Tejo. He was in the small room they had given him, near the cargo hold. It was not a cell, but it was not comfortable either. A cot, a table, a light on the ceiling. He was sitting on the cot with his back against the wall, eating a ration bar from the ship's supplies. He looked up when she came in. "We reached the border in 6 hours," Yuna said. "Thank you," Tejo said. She stood in the doorway and looked at him. In this light, under the cold white lamps of the warship, he looked even smaller than he had in the jungle. His face was tired. His eyes had dark circles under them. The bruise on his arm had turned a deep purple. He looked like a man who had not slept well in days. He looked like nothing. And that, Yuna realized, was the most dangerous thing about him. "I have to report to the High Council when we return to the homeworld," she said. "They will want to know what happened on the jungle moon." "Tell them the truth," Tejo said. "The truth is complicated." "No," Tejo said. He took another bite of the ration bar and chewed slowly. "The truth is simple. You hunted something you did not understand. You found out what it was, and you were smart enough to stop." Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been pressing against the inside of her skull since the clearing. "What would you have done if I had not stopped?" Tejo set the ration bar down. He looked at her with those dark eyes that held too much weight for such a young face. "On the first night," he said, "I found a plant by the river. Sticky sap. It smelled sweet, like fruit. The insects avoided it. That told me it was toxic." Yuna did not move. "On the second night, I boiled the sap down and collected it in a leaf. A few drops in water would cause paralysis. A full dose would stop the heart." He paused. "I had enough for 3 doses by the time your friend came to my camp." The room was very quiet. "I put it in the water packet I left for him," Tejo said. "A tiny amount, just enough to make him weak and slow, not enough to hurt him. He drank it. That is why he could not fight back when I carried him." Yuna's hands went cold. "The marks on the trees," Tejo continued. You asked about them. The triangles marked my traps. The notches counted the days. But there was a third mark, a small circle. You did not see it because it was lower, near the roots. What did the circles mean? They marked the places where I buried the rest of the poison. In the ground, in the water, in the clay I used to line my fire pits. If you had pressed the attack, if you had kept hunting me and forced me deeper into the jungle, I would have led you through those places. Your skin absorbs moisture from the air. I noticed that on the second day. The poison would have entered through your skin without you knowing. Yuna could not speak. She stood in the doorway of the small room and stared at this small, tired, bruised human who had just told her, calmly and without pride, that he had been preparing to kill all three of them with jungle plants and river mud. In 3 days. You said you were a cargo pilot, Yuna said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. I am. Where did you learn to do these things? Taeho looked at her. Something passed through his eyes again, that same sad thing she had seen in the clearing. Every human knows how to do these things, he said. We learn when we are young. We learn from the world we grew up on. It was not kind to us. It was full of things that wanted to eat us, poison us, crush us, drown us. We survived, not because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we learned. He picked up the ration bar again. That is what we are, he said. We are the species that learns. 6 hours later, the pale flame reached the border of human space. A small transport shuttle was waiting, sent by a human colony station that had picked up the emergency signal from Taeho's wrecked ship days ago. They had been looking for him. Taeho walked through the loading bay one last time. He stopped at the airlock and looked back at Yuna, who stood a few meters behind him, with her arms at her sides. I hope we do not meet again like this, he said. We will not, Yuna said. I will make sure of it. He nodded, turned, and walked through the airlock into the shuttle. The door closed, the shuttle detached. And then, it was gone. A small bright point of light, moving away against the dark. Yuna watched it disappear. 3 weeks later, she stood before the Valkyrie High Council in the Great Hall on the homeworld. The hall was enormous, carved from black stone, with pillars that rose so high they vanished into shadow. 100 elders sat in a wide semicircle, their golden eyes glowing in the dim light. Elder Doko sat at the center, his cracked face unreadable. Yuna wore her formal armor. She carried her blade at her hip. She stood straight and spoke clearly. She told them everything. The camps, the traps, the marks, Minho, the clearing, the conversation, the poison. She left nothing out and added nothing extra. She spoke for 1 hour, and when she was finished, the hall was silent. You are recommending that we remove humans from the prey registry? Yes. On the basis of one encounter with one human? Yes. Murmurs ran through the council. A young elder near the back stood up. This is weakness. One human, with a knife and some mud, and we abandon 3,000 years of tradition? Yuna did not respond to him. Instead, she reached to her hip and unclipped her blade. She held it up so the council could see it. Then, she placed it flat on the stone table before Dako. The blade was cracked. A thin fracture ran from the tip to the hilt, splitting the metal almost in two. It had cracked when she lowered it in the clearing. Not from force, from the cold of the jungle night and the heat of the jungle day, expanding and contracting the metal until it broke on its own. She had not noticed until she was back on the ship. Taeho had noticed. She was sure of it. He had seen the crack before she did. He had known her blade was broken before she lowered it. He had let her make the choice anyway. He did not beat us because he was stronger, Yuna said. He did not beat us because he was faster. He beat us because he understood us better than we understood him. In 3 days, with nothing, He took apart a Valkyrie hunting party and gave us every chance to walk away alive. She looked at the council. Now imagine 100 of them, 1,000. Imagine them with time, with tools, with ships, with each other. She paused. We have ruled this region of space for 3,000 years because we have always known what we were hunting. We did not know what a human was. Now we do. She placed her hand flat on the cracked blade. They are not prey, she said. They have never been prey. And if we are wise, we will make sure they never have a reason to hunt us. The council voted that night. Humans were removed from the prey registry permanently. A diplomatic message was sent to the nearest human colony station. It was short and formal, and said nothing about jungle moons or broken blades. But across the galaxy, in the quiet spaces between empires, the word spread. It moved through trade routes and border stations, and whispered conversations in dark rooms. The Valkyrie, who had hunted everything, had found something they would not hunt again. A simple warning, passed from species to species, empire to empire, world to world. Never hunt a human. They do not flee, they do not forget, and they never ever stop learning. The ship broke apart somewhere above the jungle moon. Tejo felt the whole craft shake and twist before the hull split open like a cracked egg. He grabbed the emergency harness and held on as fire and metal screamed around him. The escape pod launched on its own. It was small, barely big enough for one person, and it hit the atmosphere hard. The heat shield burned orange through the tiny window. Then came the trees. Branches smashed against the pod as it crashed through the canopy and slammed into wet ground. For a long time, Tejo did not move. He lay still inside the pod and listened. Birds, wind, water dripping somewhere close. He opened his eyes and checked himself. His left arm was bruised. His ribs hurt when he breathed deep. But nothing was broken. He had been lucky, if being shot down and crashed on an unknown moon could be called lucky. He pushed the hatch open and stepped out into thick green air. Trees taller than any building he had ever seen rose up around him like living walls. Their roots twisted across the ground like sleeping snakes. Everything was wet, warm, and alive. Insects buzzed near his face. Something large moved through the leaves far above. Tejo stood still and looked around slowly. He was a cargo pilot, not a soldier, not really, though he had done his military service years ago back on Earth. He flew supply runs between colonies. Simple work, quiet work. He liked it that way. But his ship had crossed into Valkyrie space by mistake, and they had not asked questions before they opened fire. He reached back into the pod and pulled out what he could find. A small knife, a thin emergency blanket, 2 water packets, a basic medical kit. No weapon, no radio that worked, no way to call for help. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly. Then he opened them again and started walking. But standing still would not help him. Far above the jungle moon, inside a warship that hung in orbit like a dark cloud, a council was already meeting. The ship was called the Pale Flame, and it belonged to the noble house of Draven, one of the oldest hunting families in the Valkyrie Empire. The Valkyrie were tall creatures, lean and sharp-featured, with skin the color of dark stone and eyes that glowed faintly gold. They had ruled their part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years, and in all that time, one tradition had never changed: the hunt. Every generation, the young warriors of the noble houses were sent to the jungle moon to prove themselves. They would track and kill a prey species, something dangerous enough to test their skill, but not so dangerous that it could not be beaten. Over the centuries, they had hunted beasts from 100 different worlds. Giant lizards, 6-legged cats, armored worms that could swallow a ship. Each hunt brought glory. Each kill earned a place in the family records. But lately, the hunts had become too easy. The warriors were bored. The prey was predictable. The glory felt hollow. That was why the council was excited when the human's ship was shot down. Yuna stood at the edge of the council table and listened as the elders spoke. She was young for a commander, barely past her first century, but she had already led 2 hunts and killed a sand dragon on the burning plains of Keth. She was fast, smart, and patient. Her golden eyes missed nothing. "A human," said Elder Doko, leaning forward with interest. He was old, his stone-dark skin cracked with age lines, but his voice was still strong. "We have never hunted a human before." "They are new to this region of space," said another elder, a thin female named Nari. "Soft creatures. No claws, no armor, no venom. They barely have technology worth mentioning." "Then why hunt one at all?" asked a younger warrior from across the table. His name was Mino, and he was tall even for a Valkyrie. He looked bored already. Yuna watched them argue. She had read the reports on humans. They were a strange species, small, weak by galactic standards, with short lives and fragile bodies. They had only recently left their home planet and begun exploring nearby systems. Most other empires ignored them completely. They were not a threat. They were not even interesting. And yet something in the reports had caught her attention. A single line buried in an old scouting file. "Do not engage human ground forces in extended conflict. They adapt." She had read that line several times. She did not know what it meant exactly, but it stayed in her mind like a thorn. "The humans survived the crash," said Doko, pulling up a display that showed the jungle moon below. A small red dot blinked on the surface. "He is alive and moving. I suggest we drop him into the southern hunting ground and begin the trial." "1 human," Minho laughed. "This will be finished before nightfall." Yuna said nothing. The council voted. The hunt was approved. Yuna would lead a team of 3 hunters to the surface. They would track the human, kill him, and bring back proof. Simple. Clean. As the others left the room, Doko stopped beside Yuna. He looked at her for a long moment. "You seem troubled," he said. "Not troubled," she said. "Careful. It is only a human." "I know," she said, "but I read something strange in the old files. A warning." Doko smiled the way old people smile at the young. "Warnings are written by the afraid. You are not afraid, are you?" "No," Yuna said. Doko nodded and walked away. Yuna stood alone in the council room and looked at the red dot on the display. It was moving slowly through the jungle. Not running, not hiding, just walking. That was the first thing that bothered her. Every prey species they had ever hunted did the same thing when dropped into the jungle. They ran, they panicked, they searched for shelter, for water, for a way out. Fear drove them, and fear made them predictable. A frightened creature was easy to track, easy to corner, easy to kill. But the red dot was not running. Yuna watched it move between the trees at a steady, calm pace. It stopped sometimes, stayed still for a few minutes, then moved again. It was heading south, toward the river. That was smart. Water meant survival. She turned off the display and went to prepare her gear. 3 hunters, 1 human, the jungle moon. It should have been simple. On the surface, Teho reached the river before sunset. He knelt by the water and drank slowly, cupping the cool liquid in his hands. Then, he sat back and looked at the sky. 2 moons hung above the trees, one pale blue and one deep red. The air smelled like wet earth and something sweet he could not name. He knew he was being watched. He had seen the ship in orbit when the clouds parted briefly during his walk. A large ship. Military, probably. And if they had shot him down and left him alive on this moon instead of killing him in space, then there was a reason. He had heard stories about the Valkyrie. Traders at the colony stations sometimes whispered about them. An old species, proud, dangerous, they like to hunt. Tejo looked at the jungle around him. He looked at the river. He looked at the small knife in his hand. Then he began to work. He did not run. He did not hide. He did not panic.